Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's final session of the conference. And the session is a very timely one. It's Eastern European Partnership in Turmoil. We have 4 panelists, out of whom I see 2 of them here right now. We have Bolle from Freie University in Berlin at the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. We have Andrea Bosco from Jean Monnet Center of Excellence at the University of Florence in Italy. Then we have 2 Ukrainian panelists who are, if they are in the room, are invited to join here. They are both from the Kiev National Economic University, and they are both having Jean Monnet chairs there. So I think, Michael, I think we start with you here. We are a bit behind schedule, but please.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman, microphone. Take the microphone. Here is a microphone. Yes, indeed. Excellent. Mr. Chairman, Professor Moravska, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here with you today. I have been invited to a similar conference last week. And last week, this conference was supposed to take place in Donetsk, which is the eastern part of Ukraine. Some more? Good. Something on the same topic like this one, but impossible to go there. The airport was closed. There are no planes flying in, civil planes. So Donetsk was hard to get to. And I pay my sympathy to people there, I have to say, because there is really a war going down there on the eastern side of your country, sir. And so when the conference was canceled, my foreign office had already told me, you are not allowed to go. I said, why not? I'm a free man, right? But think of the pension scheme, right? I think, yes, okay, now I understand. So it was kind of a little bit dangerous to go there. But I do think that, and this is what I want to touch upon today as well, that things will turn out in a way that Ukraine will stay united as a nation and will form perhaps even a better state government as before. This is the subject, and I'm very happy that Professor Moravska has invited me, because she did such an excellent job here to run this conference. And this is a scientific conference, I understand, but it has been rather timely with regard to European patterns and developments. And so that must have been the reason why I saw this morning so many high-ranking officials from the European Commission hanging around. And now we are entre nous, as the French would call it. Now the scientific part comes again. And I will try to introduce you into my views with regard to Europe. And no better place can be thought of, right? 2 big superpowers up there with the flags interested in the European Union. The Baltic now part of the family, which is very nice and perhaps even helpful to everybody. And most probably, it's not necessarily to talk about the advantages of being part of the family. Here we are at this very moment of time. But perhaps it's you are pretty much convinced, I suppose, because you benefited already. Uppsala. This is it's a very sensitive mouse here. And this is the economics part of my story. The real GDP per capita in constant dollars of, let's say, 3 countries, the Baltic countries, and then went Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. Look, they developed almost the same way as those countries who had not benefited in joining the European Union. And after They joined the enlargement process. They had to suffer and to undergo an adaptation process with high costs, but then the big jump. And over here, we come back to it later on. There is this so-called economic crisis, which you see this little hake there. And I come also back to this one right here. And sure, I mean, these countries, the Baltics, suffered as well economically, like others. But was it really a crisis? That is a question I'm going to ask. And the question has to be set into the frame of a view on Europe, which is not the land of milk and honey, because Europe's economy is in a very, very bad shape, with slow growth, with high unemployment still, with quite too high unemployment rate in almost in each country except of Austria perhaps. Youth unemployment, even Germany is hit hard, not that hard as for example Greece and others. But then there is also the poverty level, and you see people threatened by poverty and social exclusion. They are starving from hunger, young lads here, and so you can see how also this variety developed. And then we have some signs of instability in the European Union, and these signs of instability show in the popularity of right-wing parties. And there are quite some in Europe nowadays. In the national elections, right-wing parties, Eurosceptic parties, did win more than 10% of the seats and in the election in Finland, France, Denmark, Austria, Hungary, and I'm afraid to say in Latvia. So are they a threat to the stability of Europe? Is this are these the early signs of the crisis? No. We all know that it's mostly the result of being totally disappointed with the economic situation, and also, some people say, there's the democratic foundations of the European Union, transparency, legitimacy, but perhaps also efficiency is lacking. And so, will Europe go down the drain? Most probably not. We have survived quite some challenges. Here we are with some. The empty chair crisis as early as 1965, the Northern Enlargement had a huge debate with lots of side payments and bargaining around in Europe and cries for help from different countries. The discussion about the British rebate, the Southern Maastricht, oh my good Lord, the euro comes, some wanted it, others didn't. And some Americans, not some, most of them, like Barry Eichengreen and Feldstein and others, always told, oh, that's a big, big mistake Europe makes here. I think they were a little bit, well, I mean, they saw the euro rising and shining for a while, and so they were perhaps talking themselves into, no, we don't believe. So, and then the failure of the Constitution of Europe. But I'm not going into all this, because don't want to give a narrative here about the history of things and the impact of different programs. I just go to deal a little bit with the Euro challenge, I call it the challenge, and the Ukraine challenge. And again, I don't call it a crisis, because the problem is, what is a crisis? And most people talk about, the media like to talk about crises. Oh, sure. I mean, it's a paper, so you need a headline. And the headline is very boring if you say, oh, Europe is challenged. But Europe is in crisis, in deep crisis. What is a crisis? Well, there are hundreds of definitions empirically, but I am not really a big fan of empirics. Empirics come and go as time goes by. But there are theoretical considerations that can help us to understand the real meaning of a crisis and the real meaning also of Europe, which I'm trying to present my views on. And this real thing is, according at least to a very famous German sociologist by the name of Luhmann, that you start thinking about the sense of a system. Like in life science, you have a wonderful measure. Old system, we are alive; new system, we are dead. In societies, we don't have this kind of clear-cut indicator. When is a society dead? When is it when a nation is dead? You can talk about failed state and things like that. But really the meaning in a society of what death means for a society is hard to say. And so Luhmann said we should look at the real, and the real core is what makes the sense of a system. And the sense of Europe is easy to understand. The young lady, which has started to talk before, she talked about Jean Monnet and the méthode communautaire and all these kinds of things. Yes, indeed. The European Union is built as a negotiated system of negotiations, meant for further negotiations. It is to be assessed by its ability for peaceful cooperation to settle conflicts. And when this is gone, the system is dead. That's it. So how does this work, this ability of peaceful cooperation in Europe? Here we are, have a wonderful chart of Europe. I think the best you have ever saw in your life. It may look a little bit like your electronic devices at home when you look at these kind of charts, but it's pretty much the same, I suppose. It's an information flow chart. And in the middle is the European Council. And the decision building in the European Council is built by national governments. At the beginning 6, now I think we have 28, so N1 to NJ is taking enlargement and all these kind of things into consideration, and it will develop further. And some people ask, where will Europe stop? Oh, perhaps today we read in the papers that there will be a conflict at the frontier between China and Europe. Oh, perhaps earlier, I don't know, I'm not dealing with it, but this is here open. It's an open method. And this has the advantage that the different 28 meanings and notions of problems feed into one system of decision building by specific rules, also changing. For example, the whole deepening process has changed by building agents to help to run the whole thing, like James Bond. He is, as an agent, running the thing for MI6. The European Commission is as an agent running the thing for the European Council. And so is all the other ones. The EEAS, also your partnership today you are dealing with, is one of the M's down there. It's an agent doing the administrative stuff on behalf of the boss, and the boss is the European Council. We call this a principal agent model, for those of you who are not familiar with these kind of things. And the principal agent model has a big advantage that you can really distinguish who is responsible for what and what are the problems and difficulties, and is there, like in James Bond movies, a kind of agent cheating. Because as you may remember, that James Bond never goes home immediately if he is asked to do so. Well, that's the Commission. They also try to make things working their own way. So over the years, also these kind of things developed. And the most important thing is that you can see here that the nations, the government of the nations, are bound in the so-called Putnam setting. Again, for those of you who are not familiar with these terms of international relations, the Putnam setting just means that what Blair once said, if I please my voters in Britain, my people, my colleagues in Brussels will hate me. And if I please my colleagues in Brussels, my voters will hate me. So there is a multi-level, a two-folded decision-making procedures. And remember well, the voters are at home. And in democracies, you may kick them out if you are not very happy. And if you are not very happy also in this kind of decision-making system, you may be kicked out by your partners in Brussels because they don't start to talk with you like they do it with Putin, not in Brussels, but, oh, Mr. Putin, you did wrong. And we are starting to talk among ourselves, and you stay in the corner like in school. Well, I don't know whether this is a very good idea of international relations building, but given the whole thing at the beginning, nations do not have friends but interests, but they can build up friendly relations, and this is what is Europe very well known for, to try to build up relations, to settle conflicts peacefully. And, oh, this was one too early. Now, the first example, which I will be brief on, because I already took 10 minutes of my time. And the brief part will be the so-called economic crisis. The economic crisis, you remember this when I told you at the beginning, this was a kind of, downturn of the performance of the economy with the strange and very harmful results with regard to unemployment, poverty, and all that. People suffered a lot, but was the stability of this system threatened? It started with Ireland, and it was spread over to the United States, and from there it was contagious also for the banks in Europe. Well, they all work together, they give credits and things like that. So our European banks were at the brink of getting, well, through a very, very bad time. And then then it worked its way to the real economy, unemployment, growth, and so forth. The market reacted immediately. Markets are very fast. Here we are. This was a market reaction. The euro got weak and weak and weaker. And people cried, oh, and especially our American friends called, hooray, now we can see it here. This is all going down the drain. No, it did not. You can see here that in at the beginning, the euro started here. And then it went up, and then it went down. That's a regular routine in economics, that there are upswing, downswings, and so forth. And then it's even stopped before every purchasing power parity known to us. You can take the American one, you can take the European one, you can take whatever. But it stopped before. And it regained strength again. Why? Because Europe came to grips. The mechanism when havoc struck was that this impulse was not really equilibrated, mitigated. It was aggravated because of the fact that euro was hit because of the high sovereign debts of the countries and nations, especially those countries we were unfortunately a little bit keen to call pigs, Portugal and others. Sorry, sir, but what shall I say, right? That's a common language in our science. So, but the little pigs came out of it, and together with the help of the others, and the wealthier states paid a lot of money. The guess is around 1.5 trillion, not billion, which has been given by financial aid. And then Mr. Draghi told everybody he will do everything which is needed to save the euro. Well, kind of taking the risk of private and other people, and because now you can buy easily if you believe him, and you may believe him. And together, and so they bought time, because time was urgently needed, because markets really react very fast. And this time they bought was used properly because for institution building. Immediately they started to repair the system, the Eurozone system, because the missing link was not filled in. with regard, first of all, to some facilities to help out, European stability facilities, then the mechanism, and now the banking union. And the banking union was very much debated. But it's now already almost done. And now this link is closed, this gap is closed, and the next havoc, which will come one day, because we are not living in paradise here, unfortunately, or perhaps, I don't know, according to your opinion. But this havoc, when it comes and strikes, it will not aggravate, but it will be mitigated, the impact. And this is a big thing. But there will be other problems. And so the other problems is there are something, here you have the kind of, is a nice idea that spreads all over Europe during the so-called crisis grew, the sovereignty debt, especially in some countries like Greece, Portugal, and others. And now it's coming down because of Mr. Draghi and others. And we, in those days, built a model and tested the likelihood that Europe comes out of the, should I say shit? I'm sorry. Soon, no, I'm sorry, Professor, I'm really gone out of the turmoil. And yes, much better, yes, I know, yeah. Excuse my language, really. And so we built a model, and then we calculated the likelihood, and here are the results, because we used the game theoretical setting, which was mentioned this very morning, again, when some people refer to the non-zero games. And it doesn't say a lot, but if you look at game theory, and you can really deal with some of these wonderful tools we have, like a Nash equilibrium and Pareto optimum, and if you want to have details, I gave the reference down there. We started to work around this 2008, 2000 already, when I had to go to Greece to give a talk, and I told them there will be hard times to come, and they almost killed me. Not because of my bad language, Professor, but because somebody who brings bad news, right, may be killed. So this is just saying cooperate. And if you cooperate nicely, and you cooperate in a way that you bring something, and you take something, the Green Commission called it the principle of conditionality or something like that. It's called tit for tat, and you have to be patient. And we calculated that the equilibrium conditions up there, T is temptation, R are rewards, P is punishment, S is sucking, and theta is a kind of parameter to measure the horizon of politicians to settle the problem. And if this horizon is long enough, so be patient, then things will, and we calculated it in those days of about 10 years. So 2000, I think, 8 or so, 18 latest should it be done. We are now more confident now and optimistic that it will be solved already earlier. So I was never convinced that this was a crisis. It was a challenge, could be dealt within the frame of peaceful cooperation. But you know, nobody would really listen to these people who come too early. They kill them. That's the easiest way to get rid of the problem. And now when Professor Murawska asked me, well, Michael, if you come to yoga, then you have to say something as regards to Ukraine. So we started working on it a little bit, and I'm very sorry to tell you that we have not finished the whole thing, because this is very time-consuming to calculate these models. And so when it comes to external affairs, to Ukraine, the story is easily be told. What happened? There was the Orange Revolution. People gathered at the Maidan, expressed their feelings. Then they expelled the former president, dismissed the former government, and then how is this going on? I mean, they elected a new one. So, but the eastern part is still very much in danger, is it? And there's Russia around, and some more actors who are interested, perhaps. So you may ask at the beginning, does the European Union has the ability and capability? And you ask this morning, well, there have never been somebody of Ms. Ashton around in these talks, and there's a good reason for that, sir. The good reason is it's not the mandate of the European Union to deal with these kind of things. Look at Article 2.4 in the Treaty of Lisbon. In particular, national security remains the sole responsibility of each member state. That's the reason why there have been some people around from the member states, and this was totally correct. But the whole thing was to be settled between these two superpowers at the beginning there. Russia on the one hand side, United States on the other hand side, and there was already an institution available to deal with this. I come back to it in a second. It's called NATO. And this, with the sole responsibility, is also true for state budgets. And for example, this conference dealing with Eastern Partnership is, as regards to Eastern Partnership, is not involved, because this is already an institution and an agent built. But the bosses are at the European Council, and the European Partnership is only an agent, only, but still, they have something. Now, this is the first thing. The capacity of the EU is very small, very little capability really to settle these things. And in the Ukraine, well, we have experts from the Ukraine here. And as I said before, they have asked me to give a lecture in Donetsk. And so I would have loved to be there and to learn more about Ukraine. But I learned a lot today, this morning. It was terrific what I learned about it. But I still have this chart in mind. And this chart shows the outcome of the election for Yanukovych and Tymoshenko. And you can see nicely how much split this has been. So the eastern part is not that much impressed by the West, and the western part is not that much impressed by the East. So first thing is, Ukrainians should come to grips with each other and would learn to understand each other, which is hard enough. And it's very easy from a German point of view to tell that, because I have suffered from two very separate meanings 20 years of my life, or after the Second World War until the wall came down. So I know how hard it is to establish that. But there are some things here which really can be looked as an advantage for the Ukraine. And it is more than a hope I do have. I would call it an educated guess, what I am now proposing to you. It's not really a hypothesis like in the other one, because then they had a model, but here I don't have a model, but I have factors of this model. And the nice part is, for example, trade and energy. Yes, energy. Energy helps because the Russians need the market, and we need the energy. The same is with trade and commodities. These are both vice versa. And now you have to look who needs what more. Oh, well, if it comes to look at it carefully, it's really not that easy to decide. The Russian cannot just cut off everything. They have to go to Astana another time and another time to talk with Kazakhstan and all these things to hope that they will find a market for it. So the capability of the EU is, again, limited, and it will be restrained. Unfortunately, the EU has not been aware of this very early, and I don't know whether they really played a good role in that. But there is a NATO, and NATO is the one, look how it builds up, how it builds up, how it builds up. You know, closer and closer. If I would be in the Russian government, I would ask myself, well, I remember well that I gave a talk in Cairo a couple of years ago, and I showed a similar thing with the European Union. And when it came to Greece and even Turkey, they looked at me and said, "Oh, Professor, are you know that we are not imperialistic. We assure you." And then they come with the idea, but nation. But we are not a nation. So, but this is a nation on the other side. On the other side, the Russian side believes in, perhaps, or did believe a while, what our foreign minister by the name of Genscher once, when it came to the discussion about the German unification, told Russians, Germany will not engage in activities for extending the NATO closer to Russia. Well, who believes Germans? Better you don't believe me when I'm talking about this. So anyway, the thing is that Russians are a little bit skeptic in that respect, and they want to have signs to build trust and confidence. And Mr. Putin is talking, for example, also about the Eastern Partnership. As you know, he suggested there should be a revival of it, taking much more consideration of the Russian preferences. I don't know, I'm not an expert in that, but I know, again, the market reacted already with it. See how the ruble developed? Not really very nicely, I have to say. And then there have also been other impacts. There was a huge capital flow out of Russia. Growth declined. The exchange rate went down the drain. So the markets told Mr. Putin, well, listen. And so, as the markets did, so did the Ukraine itself. It says Ukraine, sure. By the election, well, that was a big event and a big achievement for the Ukraine, and I'm very happy for them. But my personal idea, and we are testing this thing now, is that the real problem, because the road for the stability and security of the Ukraine goes via Moscow. There's no question about things like that. And so who has nice connections to Moscow and to Mr. Putin in the Ukraine? The oligarchs. All these wonderful multimillionaires, also one of those serving as a president, and the other ones at the eastern part who built their own little private armies, up to 3,000 and more, 30,000 I think it was, of Mr. Akhmetov, or what his name has been. So when they started to fight, then Mr. Putin blinked, like in a chicken game. And his voice has been much more quiet now. So at the very end, I don't, Mr. Chairman, hope that I didn't take too much time. So at the very end now, here's my educated guess, and I'm very happy if it would come true that Ukraine has a bright future in a couple of years. But be patient, as I told you, and negotiate. Thank you very much indeed.
So thank you for a, I would say, hopeful full presentation. We have time for one or two questions from the audience. So anyone? Yeah, please, and state who you are and where you come from.
Hi, I'm Jeff Summers from the University of Wisconsin, where I serve as Associate Professor of Political Economy and the Senior Fellow at the Institute of World Affairs. I also am visiting faculty here at SSC Riga. Happy to be here in that capacity as well. I want to thank Professor Bolle for a fascinating lecture. I would say that with regards to Ukraine, I share your optimism. I think that now that Russia has Crimea, and I'm not even convinced that from the outset that it was their serious intention to take it, but regardless, of course, they now have it, and they did take it. I don't see Russia making any further moves to grab territory in Ukraine. I think the situation will stabilize. I also think, though, however, that the beneficiaries of this conflict have been twofold. Perhaps manyfold, but at least two that we can identify are Russian industry. So if we take a look at the worsening exchange rate in Russia, this is actually good for Russian industry and serves as a kind of de facto tariff and helps to promote their goods as imports, of course, become more expensive. So for Russian industry, I suspect that they view this worsening exchange rate rather favorably. Another place that's actually benefiting, or has benefited from this turbulence, is the place that we're sitting right now. There's been, I think, quite a massive influx of hot offshore money flooding into Riga's offshore banks as a consequence of this unstable situation to the east. And in fact, I was just speaking with an offshore kind of retail operator who establishes offshore companies and also deals with the offshore banks, someone who has been in this business here for 20 years. And she reported that last month was her highest turnover since she's been in Latvia. So we obviously are seeing some benefits here. But I'll close there. I just had comments and no questions.
Yeah, thank you. You have any comment on the comment?
Well, I mean, I think we both agree in most of the things we are talking. And may I ask you a question? The question I have is it true that one of the high representatives of the Foreign Office said fuck the EU in the talk with the ambassador of the United States to Ukraine? Is it true? You never know. You never know.
I think we need to ask our Estonian friends.
I think she is right, because she didn't mean fuck the EU in terms of I don't like the EU. No, she meant they should be more careful. And she was right in doing that. That's it. She is not, but it was reported in the media as if it was blaming the EU or something. No, it was an abbreviation for please be more careful with the fire. And I suppose that's what it was. But I'm not, and I don't believe in rumors anyway. I mean, you never know, right? So, the only thing is, with my view of this, I'm not optimistic. I'm a scientist, and I'm trying at this very moment also to develop this in a more sound, so to say, format. These ideas. But you know, this takes time, and so perhaps one day, if Professor Rowska invite me to publish this in one of her beautiful journals, and I will be whatever. Then it could be ready. But indeed, it's more than just optimism. But you know, the problem is with economists, and Mr. Summers there, and we both are economists, as well as I understand also our chairman here. We economists like to give prognoses. We love it. It's not prophecy, it's just a prognosis based on a sound basis. We will say, you will see, and then this and this will happen. But economists never give a date. This is a mystery of good economic prognoses. Oh, well, I mean, and I have not given a date. And the first part I did, because this was based on a very sound basis. This one is just an educated guess.